Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of No Cap Sports, financial education answers to your questions that you have. Your student athlete, this is your guide to everything you need to know about financial literacy and in the NIL space. Today we have a special guest with us, Didier Occident. He is a Florida State grad. He's the founder of Occident Wealth Management, a financial advising firm with Northwestern Mutual. He's based out of Richmond, Virginia, and has been in the business for about 12 years. Now, get this: he was a top under 5-year advisor in the southern region of the United States during his first few years and was ranked 4th nationally in the country. So we're really, really excited to have you on. He's an avid sports fan and founded the Secure the Bag financial literacy program in 2018. He's passionate about empowering student athletes. He's going to do that today with us. And we're just so excited to have you, Didier. How you doing today?
I'm good, Will. I'm good. Glad to be here, man. How are you doing?
Man, doing well, man. Doing well. Another day in paradise,
Good.
right? Absolutely.
No doubt.
So let's get it started. Let's get into it. So first and foremost, I want to kind of ask you this question. It's a little bit off script, but what is your why? What is your why? Why did you kind of get into the business? I mean, what have you seen in your own personal life, whether it be your upbringing or just out in the world that made you want to get into this side of the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, it's about educating and empowering people. I think my why is simple. Everything that we do from the time we are babies, right? Your parents, it's about getting you into the right preschool and kindergarten, first grade, and education, right? Why do you need that? It's all in the hope that you develop into a self-sufficient adult who can take care of themselves financially, right? And when every single decision is made with, really at the end of the day, that's the end goal, right? The end goal is, hey, I want my son or daughter to be successful so they can, have money and do all the things that they want to do. But yet all that time and effort goes into getting you to a career where you can make money or in a position to, but nobody along the way really teaches anybody how to manage it, which is kind of crazy and bizarre when you really think about it, right? It's like all these things matter so that you can have money to live comfortably, but no one teaches you what to do with the money when you get it. So that is my why.
Very good. So tell me, to that end, how would you personally define being financially literate? And what does that encompass for your average, college student athlete?
So I think being financially literate isn't about having a ton of money. It's about understanding the way money works and how it works in your own life. We all have a different money story based on our background, whether we had money growing up, whether we didn't, how our parents were with money or the people around us. So all of those things play into how we view money and the decisions we make. And the more we can understand that, the more financial literate we can become, right? You can have a ton of money and not necessarily go broke, but you're not financially literate, right? It's more about understanding how your relationship with money plays into the decisions that you make every single day.
Absolutely. So I think a common mistake people make is that as soon as their income rises, their expenses rise right with it. So there's really no difference there. So talk to me about some common mistakes that you hear from college student athletes or when it comes to finances or even just general mistakes.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off what you just said. I think the biggest mistake I see with adults and people in general is the thought that if I only made this, everything will be solved. And I think that is maybe the number one financial myth is, well, you know what? I could save more if I made 80 grand instead of 60 grand, or if I made 60 instead of 40, if I made 100 instead of 80, because of what you just said, your lifestyle rises with it. There's not one person that I've met I ask them, I'll say, hey, what would help you save more? Oh, make more money. But having more money doesn't make you better with money, right? You just find more things to spend it on. So, and I always say this, if you can't manage $1,000, you can't manage $1 million, right? And I think that's the greatest myth in the sense that it's really about, and Will, I'm sure you can attest this, you might look back on money you made. I think about when I was 25 years old, I was making 34 grand a year and I was comfortable. Right? Like I don't really remember wanting for anything. Like I lived, I went out with my friends, I did stuff. And then you make 60 years and it's like, how the heck did I ever live off of you're like, how did I, because you're like, I can't live off that. So the more money you make, you look back and you're like, how did I ever live off that?
Yeah.
So to transition that to college, I think the mistakes that people make in college are thinking that, oh, once I get money, I'll be better with it. Or I don't really have a ton of money now. So these decisions don't really matter that I make. And really, you have the opportunity. A lot of what your first real relationship with money is going to come in college. And if you can either set yourself up for a lifetime of success or failure based on some of those decisions that you make in college when you start to build that relationship.
Absolutely. So tell me, just in the kind of current landscape, what are some kind of rules of thumb? So you think about investing, you hear about the rule of 72, and when you think about savings, or attribute this amount to your expenses or this amount to saving. What are kind of some rules of thumb, some easy tips and reminders for our student athletes?
Well, I think everything starts with a budget, right? And I think one of another misconception is everything we're sold is about, oh, pick this stock or invest in Bitcoin, and it's like nobody wants to hear that investing and financial success is the road to it is pretty boring, right? Like Warren Buffett is worth $84 billion, right? He's worth $84.5 billion. We all know who Warren Buffett is. Everyone talks about what a great investor he is and all that. He is, right? He's a really good investor. But of Warren Buffett's 84 billion, 81 billion of it has been earned after his 60th birthday, right? So the thing that Warren Buffett has done that nobody wants to talk about is the fact that he's been investing religiously since he was 17 years old, right? And he makes good decisions, but he's been consistent. And I think rather than focusing on what vehicle are we investing in, can we be disciplined and consistent in our habits? Just like it took for them to become a college athlete, it didn't happen overnight, right? They might have gotten the offer, but that's a culmination of work that they've put in that's compounded over time. And financial success is much the same.
Absolutely. So when you think about that, you have to kind of think of it in terms of, I think Malcolm Gladwell coined the term, or maybe someone else did. He mentioned it, he wrote about it, about your 10,000 hours, right? So at what point did you get that? And I think in the book Outliers, it talked about how Bill Gates got his 10,000 hours very, very early because he had a best friend who mom's worked at a computer company, right? So sometimes we have these performance enhancing opportunities in our lives that can really set us apart and set us ahead of the pack. So thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned the consistency piece about set it and forget it in a way, right? So how do you get those 10,000 hours, to really be great at what you want to do? So let's talk about, kind of something that can be taboo. And, we as college students, we obviously need to build credit and start early, but, give us some things, some credit card tips. And you mentioned the budget starting from that place, and we'll get into some other aspects. But let's talk about credit cards and how they can trap you and high interest rates, and how they can also be a great thing if used with discipline and used efficiently.
Absolutely. So, and this is a personal, I tell a lot of student athletes this when I was in college, right? So, I don't think they can do it now with the credit card people on campus, but they would, predatory, they'd have the tables set up and they'd get you a free, poster or beer koozie or lava lamp or whatever it was. And, you're a broke college student and you're like, oh, I need this for my dorm room, or I go drinking on the weekends. I need the bottle, the beer opener. And I signed up for 2 myself, and my parents told me to not use it wisely. And I eventually had an emergency which I thought was an emergency. There was a girl that wanted to go out with me and I didn't have any money. And I said, let me throw it on the credit card and I'll pay it when the bill comes. Well, the bill came, I didn't have any money. And that it was like $49. It wound up being, $230, and the interest that they charge. And I didn't understand all that at the time, right? I was like 19, 20 years old, and that screwed my credit for years. And here I was getting ready to get married 7 years later and buy a house. We just got married, and I'm worried that it's going to prevent us from being able to buy the home, right? And you think these decisions don't matter, but I learned a valuable lesson about credit, right? And it's not to be scared, because there are people that go the other way with it in terms of, and luckily for me, it had fallen off my credit report about 2 months before we'd gotten the house. But we think when you're in college, oh, these decisions, it's almost this, unique time where you're still a kid, but you have the freedom of an adult. You're in a bubble for 4 years, and you almost think, I can do adult things and have no repercussions like I'm a child. But a lot of the things we do can set us up for success or failure down the line. And I think with credit, there are people that go the other way that are scared of it, right? Because they've heard these stories. So it's almost like the people who are scared to invest because they've heard horror stories about investing. So they hoard their money in the bank. So going the other way can have a negative effect as well. You don't want to be scared of credit. You want to be able to utilize it and use it to your advantage. So one of the things that I talk to people about is just the app Credit Karma. That's a great app that you can use to pull up and see where your credit score is. And I think one thing that I would recommend to students is to look at your credit score. Make sure it's accurate. There's a lot of times you'll pull up, there's 3 different credit agencies, you'll pull it up. It won't be accurate, or they'll have a wrong address or something that happened, especially when you're moving around. One thing that can really get you screwed up is if you have light bill in your name or utilities in your name, as you do in college, and not paying a final bill, or if you had roommates who didn't pay. I know a lot of people where something like that happened to them, where they get dings on their credit because it goes to collections. So making sure all accounts are closed out when you move, things like that. And then get a credit card with a small limit. And one of the things that I recommend to people is utilize it. Start building that utilization now. Keep it under about 30%, and just buy 1 or 2 things and pay it off every single month, right? Because what it is that's a score that's going to let people know how likely, if I give you money, am I to get it back. And if you at 18, 19, 20 years old, I can give you money and you're going to give it back to me, then I'm going to be, when you actually have a salary and a job and a career, I'm going to be comfortable giving you a lot more money. And that's going to determine what you have to pay for a house, the type of leverage you have. I had a conversation with a friend of mine today who works for an NBA team, and she's got guys who've never established credit. They're millionaires and don't have a card for the incidentals when they go on the road for hotels. Right? So think about, they're millionaires and they haven't established credit and need to figure out how they're going to get the incidentals, or have somebody else put their card up for the incidentals at a hotel. So a credit card is leverage and it's power. You just have to make sure you utilize it properly and don't let it use you.
Wow, there you go. You talked about, briefly, you mentioned the utilization piece to keep it under 30%. What other factors go into our credit score?
Your length of history. So this goes back to not being afraid and starting it now. So the longer that you can show, again, there's that word consistency. The longer you can be consistent in making payments and saying, hey, at 19, 20, 21, this person was paying on this bill the whole time, your credit score is going to shoot up. And it usually doesn't take much to do that. We worked with student athletes where they started with a credit score in the upper 500s, and in a year of getting a credit card, making consistent payments, it went up to like 740. Mm-hmm. So that consistency is a big piece. So the length of your credit history, the balance, and then the type of credit and the number of credit lines that you have.
There you go. So I wanted to ask about this. This is a little bit of a personal question for me, honestly. Yeah. Talk to us about, and I'm sure many student athletes that are watching this, some may have similar situations. Talk to me about the family tax. That tax where you have to help out, the folks back home, and they raise you, they help you get to where you are. But can I talk to us about that and how that can, work into your financial planning?
Right, we call it survivor's guilt. So I think it's a touchy subject, and it's difficult because, and there's a lot of athletes we know who are from disenfranchised backgrounds and people who have to help family out, and everyone feels, the neighborhood poured their heart into you to getting you to that point, and then you feel like you owe them something. I think there's 2 things. Understanding that as much as anyone has supported you, your talent, you are the one who had to stay consistent and do it, right? And you can't live for anyone else, ultimately, at the end of the day. With that being said, we're all human. We all want to help where we come from and help the people that help get us where we are. And I think the key there is to draw boundaries. and to set up a plan, right? I read a quote that boundaries are an act of love to yourself and towards others. And I love that because if you can draw boundaries and say, hey, you know what, this is what I'm willing to give, right? And come up with a plan, work with an advisor. We help guys with this all the time. Hey, I want to help out. There's nothing wrong with helping out. It's that when that boundary is not set, right, that's when people overstep and you have the awkward situations where, all right, let's draw a boundary and say, what am I bringing in? What can I afford to give without sacrificing my own goals? Right? Because that's the other thing is at the end of the day, no one else can live your life for you. And you have to draw boundaries and be able to say within yourself and say, hey, I'm going to give this person X, Y, Z, and that's it. And I talk about letting the budget be the bad guy. If you have a budget that you say, hey, this is the line that we're drawing, and this is what I have allocated to it, there's no misnomers, there's no misconceptions, right? Now, it's not going to be perfect, right? Because there are going to be times where someone will come to you and you'll be at a weak moment or in the circumstances, you'll go over that. But you're just like if you have a playbook for football or basketball or volley, whatever it is, you're not going to be perfect every time you go out on the field to execute, but the plan allows you to have guidelines. And when you do go off track, you can go back and say, hey, this is what I need to do to get back on track. So I think drawing those boundaries and having those conversations is really, really, really important. So I always talk about letting the budget be the bad guy.
Let the budget be the bad guy. Make sure you guys get that. And I can attest to having a friend that let the budget be the bad guy. You know, anytime we wanted to go somewhere, her name was Taye. She was an intern. You're in Dallas, Texas, and I'll make a long story short. We wanted to go to Studio Movie Grill one night. It was $5 Tuesdays, right? $5 movie, and you get your food. You know, so they get the money. You know how that goes. Well, we said, hey, Ty, you want to come? You know, watch a movie? You know, you can eat before, what have you. So, check the budget. Not in the budget, can't make it, and she stuck to it. And so I've definitely seen that in action. So very good.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll say, Will, on that is to making sure that hold on, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about the budget being the bad guy. Don't lend money that you can't afford not to get back.
There you go.
Right. If I'm giving you money, if I get it back, cool, but I'm not planning on it.
Absolutely.
Right. Because I think we have to be clear a lot of times on, hey, it has to be something. Don't lend out what you can't afford not to get back.
Very nice. But leads me into my next question, investing. Don't invest money you can't afford to lose. So let's talk about investing. And so I know there's so many different ways, so many different avenues, but particularly let's start at the basic level. And I know our student athletes are not yet in their careers for the most part, but they will be one day. So let's briefly touch on 401ks, kind of IRAs and, you know, Roth traditional. And let's move to like, you know, or the apps that you recommend, like Acorns, things like that.
Yeah. So I think the first thing with investing is, and I'll be clear, this isn't advice for anyone, but you know, if anyone wants to email or reach out, have a specific, this is all going to be person specific. But I think the biggest thing is understanding two things: your time horizon and your risk tolerance. These are the two things that I think people screw up the most. And I think in college, especially, because I think one of the great things that's going on now is that with a lot of the apps, there's a lot of younger people getting in the game and a lot more awareness about that. So I think that's a good thing, but I think there's a lot of blind leading the blind, right? And I think like anything, it comes down to fundamentals, right? And understanding, all right, what's my risk tolerance? What's my time horizon? Don't let someone else tell you the risk to take with your own money, right? When we're talking stocks or Bitcoin's a hot thing, right? So there's a lot of, you know, college kids who are like, hey, let me get into Bitcoin and let me get into this. You have to understand there's a difference between gambling and investing, right? And investing, and a lot of people conflate the two, where it's, I'm going to put money in and turn a quick profit and take it out. That's not investing. If that's what you want to do, that's fine, but you have to be clear on the risk that you're taking. And I think understanding, all right, what's my speed limit? So I talk about this all the time. If you're on the highway, we all have a different speed limit. Speed limit 70, we'll all go 70. Some people go 75. Some people will go 85. Some might go, some might go 90. But we all have that. Why do we do that? Because we're comfortable with the risk to get to our destination quicker, right? But we all have that thing, Will, right? Where it's like, whoa, I'm going 87. I gotta, you start pumping the brakes a little bit, because there's that breaking point where it becomes less about getting there quickly and more about, well, what happens if something happens, right? If I get a reckless driving ticket, or I get pulled over, I get an accident, whatever it is, everyone has that point where you no longer feel, even though you could go 100 and get there quicker, we have that breaking point of, all right, this is my comfort zone. And investing is the same thing. There's going to be a risk you're going to be willing to take, right? And then there's going to be a risk where it's the gains don't outweigh the negatives for you. And finding that sweet spot is very important, because most people don't understand it. All they see is, oh, I can make this much. But you have to understand the price for doubling your money is you got to be willing to not flinch when you lose half your money. And too many people get in thinking it's going to go like this, and as soon as it goes like this, they're out and they lose their money. And they would have been much better off doing something much more conservative, right? That would have guaranteed they got a little bit of money and wouldn't have lost any. So it's about finding what that comfort zone is. And then the time horizon is about how long is it till I need to take this money? What is my mindset in terms of when I'm going to touch it? And the longer you're willing to part with the money, the more risk you can take.
Absolutely.
Right. If you need money in a year, you shouldn't invest it, period. Right. People don't like to hear that, but I'm telling you, keep it in cash, because a year is not enough time. Right. And the last thing you want is time to take out the money for whatever you needed it for, and you have less than you put in. So I typically say 2 years is a minimum, right? Time horizon to even invest. If it's less than 2 years, there's an inherent risk there. And if it's over 2 years, all right, then it's about how long till I really need it, and then what is the risk I'm willing to take with it.
Very good. Let's kind of shift a little bit. So when you talk about student athletes and kind of where they are now with their investments and what have you, let's talk about when it comes to NIL opportunities and, and taxes and 1099s and all those fun numbers and things like that. What's your kind of take on that? What do you typically share?
So this is where it's an exciting world, right? It's an exciting time that the student athletes are able to profit, and it's long past time. But with that, there's some concerns I have, because I think what we've done is we've said, all right, the NCAA, everyone's making this money. It's like everyone's fishing and getting all these fish, and you guys couldn't eat before. But the thing that no one's talking about is they haven't given up any of their own fish. They just tossed the student athlete a fishing rod and said, you can fish too. So they haven't taught you how to fish, how to clean the fish, how to do, right? They haven't done any of that, which would have been nice. So now it's like student athletes are now figuring out how to make their own money, but then how do I pay the taxes? How do I do all this stuff? That's my biggest concern, is understanding these endorsements. You're going to be 1099, which means no one's taking out taxes for you. And forget college athletes. This is what sends Wesley Snipes to jail and all these people to jail. This sends adults to jail, right? Because you get endorsements, you get all this stuff. You don't realize, hey, I really have to withhold. I have to be disciplined and take out 20% or 30% and put it to the side on my own volition to make sure that when Uncle Sam comes, right, I have the money to pay. So how it's going to work is you get this deal, they pay you, you sign for 10 grand, great. You're getting a check for 10 grand. Nobody's taking out the tax. And what you have to realize is that company's going to deduct that expense. And that means you're going to get a 1099 for you to file on your income taxes. And you have to pay when you file your taxes. So you have to be smart and put that money aside up front. And I'm afraid that's going to get a lot of people messed up.
I would totally agree on that. It makes me at my first year of business, so I definitely can
Yeah,
relate.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
didn't know that paper was coming. I thought everything was
Yeah,
good.
no, I mean, and it's human nature, right? Like when the first year I worked as an advisor, and I was putting money aside, and
Mhm.
it's always less than what, you're thinking, oh yeah, I should be good. And I remember I owed like 15 grand, and I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
right? Luckily I had the money, but I had been taking it out myself, and I was still 15 grand short. So whatever you think you owe, you'll owe more. So you need to err on the side of caution.
absolutely. Yeah, it's not like you had the right kind of problems. If you save some, it's still at 15 to pay. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
awesome, man. Yeah. So when we talk about and we're thinking about student athletes and kind of marketplace we're in now, do you have any? And I know you want to give I guess direct advice, but when you talk about different banks and some people hoard a lot of money, and put it in savings accounts and nothing really happens there, right?
Yeah.
Or versus what credit cards that give the best cashback bonuses. Like what tips or apps or resources do you use or read upon or YouTube videos? Like what can help me to
Yeah.
get smarter and continue the conversation?
Yeah. There's a great book called Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth that I like. But I think just in terms of tips, I think about it in this phase. The first thing you want to do is under emergency fund, right? What do I need in savings? What do I need in cash, right? So there's a fine line where you can have too much in cash, but that's not making money. But then, and I see this trend a lot too with younger people who want to start investing and are aware of that. That's great, but not understanding that what enables you to be successful in investing is being able to have a cushion that is there in case something happens. It doesn't help you if you invest and don't have enough in savings, because if you have an emergency, well, guess what? Now you're going to prematurely have to go in and take out the investment and not be able to let that money work for you. So it's about finding, all right, how much do I need in an emergency fund for savings? And then it's about, all right, when I'm investing, how do I, what's my risk tolerance? How do I want to allocate it? Acorns is great. Fidelity, Vanguard, TD Ameritrade. If you're trying to do it yourself, those are great apps and tools that you can have. And then obviously want to work with a professional, right? And determine if that's something you want to do. If you want the guidance, find a trusted professional. Like we work with a lot of student athletes and helping them with this stuff. I'm happy to help anybody who has questions or wants to look into that. And then make sure that you're set up, understand the fees on the platforms, and then understand what you're investing in. I think one of the things about Acorns that I think is difficult is, and there was a boom of people opening these types of accounts over the pandemic. But again, I think with investing, everyone automatically goes to the stock market. And I think I almost try to think of that as a workup too, because because you want something you can do consistently. So I see this time and time again where someone has a couple grand or a few $100s, because I think most Acorns accounts, like the average balance is $4,500. Because what I've seen a lot of people do is they have a lump sum of money from something. They say, I want to get into investing. And then they buy a couple stocks. And then it's like, all right, now what? They don't know what to do, right? And they don't know how to maneuver. I'd say a lot of times starting out, you want to look at some mutual funds or ETFs, things that you can invest in consistently, right? I think it's like when someone gets a gym membership and you go one time, right? Or a few times, and then you don't continuously go. And it's like, it's great that you got into it and dumped a couple grand in, but like at the end of the day, if 2 years later, that's all you ever did, you'd be better off buying some funds and putting $50 per month into it, right? You're giving me consistency over being intense one time, right? Give me something that you can do every month rather than something you can just do one time. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give people.
Absolutely. And to ensure our listeners are informed, talk to us about the difference between an individual stock and, as you can buy fractional stock these days
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
a mutual fund or an index fund. Give us kind of just the general overall difference for our listeners.
Yeah. So if we're talking, fractional stock, that's great. If you can do that every single month, right? I think that's a great thing that people are letting that that is being allowed to, because I think one of the problems with stock is it's so expensive a lot of times. People have money to put in once, but not consistently. But, just a general overview, stock is going to be an individual company. So your fortunes are tied to the profits and losses and the share price of one individual stock, right? And when you don't have a ton of money, that can be a risky proposition because you're not able to spread that money around. So what you're able to do to get true diversity, if you don't have a lot of money, is invest in funds, right? ETFs, which track the market, or mutual funds that are a collection of stocks. So a company will buy a bunch of stock, package it in a fund, and then you're buying the fund every month at a price, and then you're getting a share of the profit, right? So you're able to get, if you can't afford, Amazon is 3,000 some a share and Netflix is 600, you can buy a fund that owns these stocks, and then you're getting a piece of the profit through that. And it's your ability, you're then enabled to be more consistent in how you invest and be able to do it rather than being able to only buy a fractional share or buy it one time and not have money to go back.
Excellent. Mr. Didier, tell me, is there any kind of general advice, any kind of closing or parting words you want to share with our listeners as it relates to financial literacy, investing, NIL, or what's some parting words you have for our listeners?
I think the most important thing I would say, or I say that a lot, there's a lot of most important things, but one of the most important things I think is understanding the opportunity. Everyone learns these lessons at different ages, right? We have a podcast where we talk to former athletes, and a lot of them are, hey, I learned it on my second contract, or I learned it after. There's no substitute for how young you are. We look back at time and it goes by so fast. And when you are young is when you're not thinking the most about it, and when you have the greatest opportunity in front of you. And with the ability for you to earn money now at such a young age, it's tremendous, right? And I think the myth of, hey, well, I'll start saving when I make X amount of money. Compound interest is all about time. And believe me, you are better off putting $100 away at 18 years old, right? And investing $100 a month than you are putting away $300 a month at 35 years old because of that time, right? But there's no substitute for time. So it's one of those things where no matter how small it is, starting now is going to make all the difference. And honestly, the difference between starting at 18, 19, and 30 is going to be the difference of whether you're a millionaire or not, right? If you have a humble life, there's no substitute for that compounding effect of interest. And starting where you are now is a tremendous opportunity. And with the ability to, with the NIL, that opportunity has increased up exponentially.
Absolutely. I think, was it Einstein that said that a compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world? Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
Yeah, racks on racks, baby.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. So, where can our listeners, where can they find you? Where can they look you up?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Didier Occident, my name, which is on the screen. And then our program, STB program, it's at STB program on Twitter and Instagram. And then also, obviously, our website's stbprogram.com.
Very good, man. Make sure you guys secure the bag and get in contact with this guy who has a wealth of knowledge and more to share. So on behalf of No Cap Sports, my name is Will Baggett for Didier Occident. We want to say thank you so much for your time and for your engagement, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Appreciate it.